Hello and welcome back to the Intro-Drone Podcast, your 30,000 foot view of the commercial drone industry. It is Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. My name is CJ Smith, joined today with Michael Peel, Chairman of Intro-Drone, and our special guest tuning in and joining us from the UK, Gemma Alcock. She is the founder and CEO of the SkyBound Rescuer project. Gemma is an award-winning innovator, respected thought leader in the use of drones in public safety. She was selected in a prestigious competition as the woman making the most difference in drones for search and rescue around the world, receiving the title of the woman to watch in UAS in 2018. So really thrilled to have her on. We love all public safety use cases for the drone industry. It's a big part of our show and our community here at Intro-Drone. So thrilled to have her on. We'll be talking about some public safety news. We'll be talking about Skydio, which is now available to public safety workers. We'll be talking about medical UAV network in the UK. And then finally, drones being used to deliver COVID tests in Scotland's rural communities. So Gemma, thanks again for joining us today. I gave a kind of a brief introduction about you and your background, but I'd love for you to just kind of share a little bit about yourself with the Intro-Drone audience, some of the work you do, and maybe how you made it into the drone industry.
Yeah, hi, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So my journey into the drone world was triggered by saving a life as a beach lifeguard for a charity in the UK called the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, or RNLI, it's more commonly known. And that experience was quite a profound and life-changing experience for me. And I knew in that moment that I wanted to dedicate my career to advancing life-saving. And the first step on that journey was dedicating my university dissertation to the RNLI. And the brief was as broad as find the problem that the RNLI were facing and solve it with technology. And the problem that I found that they were facing was finding people lost at sea during darkness. And it takes them 3 to 4 times longer to find someone in darkness than it would in daylight, which could be the difference between life and death in certain circumstances. 25 to 40% of their searches every year were done in darkness. That's thousands of searches. And through this research, I also found that the Coast Guard helicopters were the asset that helps them the most. But during darkness, it takes an average of 40 minutes from being requested to taking off before they even transit to the search area and start looking for that missing person. So in search and rescue, we have what we call a golden hour, which is 1 hour to find the missing person and get them to hospital for the best chance of survival. So during darkness, the helicopters were missing that window of opportunity. So the project became about how do we give the benefit of the helicopters to the lifeboat crews, but instantly? And that's when it became drone technology. I continued that research for 18 months after graduating. Through that process, I had a lot of police and fire reach out to me to hear about that research because this was 2015. It was a very new area. Not many people had started to research into it in any great depth. So I founded SkyBound Rescuer to be able to help all emergency services to explore the use of drone technology, but also to work with the drone industry to create better products and services for public safety.
Great.
So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah. So who are some of the organizations you work with, if you can tell us, and how do you kind of help them either adopt the drone technology or answer some of the questions that they have?
Yeah, so an emergency service example would be Essex Police. I've worked quite closely with them. They actually came to me with a problem around training and how to maintain competence in their drone pilots. So they had scaled their drone pilot team up quite quickly, and they were starting to notice that there was some weaknesses in their drone pilots that was being experienced at scale across the team. And so they wanted to identify what the root cause for those were. So I did a big research project with them looking into skill fade and knowledge fade. And we created some training products and some optimized flight reference cards to help combat those challenges. Mm-hmm. And an example of a drone technology company that I work with is my current project that I'm working on in partnership with HeroTech 8. And HeroTech 8 manufacture drone-in-a-box stations. Ultimately, they are automation state platforms. They don't build the drone, they build the box. But you can retrofit your Mavic or Anafi into the box and it automates that drone. So it will recharge the drone. You can submit flight plans over the internet. So essentially you can fly that drone from anywhere in the world. They've got these boxes along the Malaysian-Thai border and they're flying them from the UK. And we're working together to form what we're calling an emergency drone network, where we can place these drones, these boxes, where they're most needed across the UK, so that any emergency service can task a drone on demand to any emergency and have a drone on scene within 5 minutes of request. So those are two of the kind of projects that we work on.
Very cool. So it's essentially police or fire services could use the same aircraft?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So we're looking at what the term in this world is interoperability, when any emergency service can task as a shared asset, essentially. And yeah, it'll be, we're looking to be clear, we don't see this as a replacement to the Coast Guard helicopters or the police helicopters. We want this service to work with and complement the helicopter services, because it has never been, nor will it ever be, viable to task a helicopter to every emergency. Even though every emergency benefits from an aerial view, it would just be too expensive. Whereas it could someday be viable to task a drone to every type of emergency to support any emergency service, because it's significantly cheaper. And so that's what we're aiming to achieve, to blend those services together to improve overall availability, response times, resilience, that kind of thing for air support in general.
Yeah, and one can easily imagine a future where we have rapid drone deployment via those drones in the boxes that you're talking about in areas that are have the highest risk potential of a human either being put in danger, like a beach, being carried out by the tide, or even public parks that are large scale and mountainous. There might be benefits of having drone boxes available to be deployed in the case of an emergency.
Yeah, definitely. We're looking at so actually when they planned where the helicopter bases were way back when, the police helicopter services here looked at crime harm data, and the Coast Guard helicopters looked at SAR data to realize where the hotspots are, because you can't offer the same response time to everywhere across the country, because that's impossible. Geography prevents that from being realistic. So we're looking at the moment, we're looking at the hotspots of SAR harm. So when someone goes missing, the chances of harm happening to that missing person, that's the hotspots that we're trying to identify at this stage to work out where best to put these boxes.
And how do the economics of that work? Because I know a lot of public safety drone program leaders, they had to kind of make their case to the higher ups to get funding for something like this. So if there's a shared asset, is it leasing it on a monthly term, or are you paying for as you use it per use case?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's at this stage, we're very much in the requirements capture stage and working with stakeholders to best understand that. So if we look at the current services here in the UK, the Coast Guard helicopters, they have a contract with a service provider. They give a certain amount of money for that 10-year contract, and it's unlimited use within that 10-year period. And they just have to meet certain performance requirements. Whereas the police helicopters, they are funded through the Home Office, so part of the government, but also through police contributions. So every time a police force uses NPAS, the helicopter service, they pay for that. So what we're trying to achieve will be very different. First of all, one business case consideration that we're looking at the moment. These boxes, we want them to house up to 3 drones. And so once we have them in these optimal locations, they can also be leased to commercial customers as well for infrastructure inspection. So we can, we're not expecting the infrastructure to be paid for by emergency services. We're expecting it to be paid for use, but we don't want cost-based deployment decisions, especially when there's life at risk.
Right.
So what we're looking at the moment is they pay a fixed rate per year for unlimited use for emergencies, and for any pre-planned tasks like mapping or planning purposes, then they'll pay per use, because they can assess their budget for those kind of things like a commercial partner would. But when there's risk to life, we don't want cost to be a consideration.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, especially when you compare to the helicopter deployments that we're talking about before, and just the extra coverage that we're able to get here. I'm assuming, based on my knowledge of drones, the costs therein, et cetera, that you wouldn't approach even a single flight of a helicopter within multiple deployments of the drone over time.
Exactly. So police helicopters at the moment, they cost around £2,800 per flying hour. And that has actually been increasing as well, because the maintenance of our police helicopter service have a real challenge on their hands with an aging fleet of aircrafts. And as they continue to age, they need more maintenance, and therefore their operating costs are going up, and therefore the cost of use is going up. So that's why this is a great opportunity. This is the right time to look at alternative solutions like this. So yeah, and viability with helicopters always has to be a factor, because they are so expensive. An example of this is in search and rescue. If we've got a missing person and we don't know the direction of travel, then there's this graph that the police helicopters they use, and it shows that after just 12 minutes of walking at an average walking pace for an adult, it becomes unviable to task a helicopter, because the search area has expanded so much, because we have to assume it expands with time in every direction, because we don't know the direction of travel. So just after 12 minutes, it's unviable for a helicopter. Whereas this kind of solution with small drones, I feel like those scenarios are going to be where small drones come into their own.
Yeah. Yeah, like you're saying, speed is just so important, and the golden hour, or it even sounds like the golden first 12 minutes, just makes such a big deal, and you can get drones up in the air faster and potentially save lives quicker. So, well, great, Gemma. Thanks again for being here, and we're going to dive into a little bit more of the work that you're doing in the second half of this recording. We have a couple articles we want to get to today. So the first, connected public safety technology company Axon is now offering Skydio drones to public safety industry via Axon Air. As a Skydio Elite partner, Axon has become the exclusive reseller and digital evidence management partner of Skydio's products to law enforcement and emergency responders around the world. I mean, Gemma, we know that Skydio is autonomous drones. I wonder if you could just kind of talk to us a little bit about using autonomous drones for search and rescue, using autonomous drones for public safety, first responders. Maybe just kind of compare and contrast some of the advantages or potential, maybe not disadvantages, but just considerations that need to be taken into account.
Yeah, so first of all, I'll say that unfortunately I haven't had a chance to fly a Skydio yet. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think they're available in the UK yet, but I have been watching their progress eagerly from across the pond as they've gone from strength to strength. So I'm very excited for the day that they start being used in the UK. And really with drones, at the moment, they are having already great time-saving benefits to search and rescue and to other public safety missions. But actually, this is just the tip of the iceberg, because they're still restricted in that they have to travel with the first responder before they're launched. So the future of this is really looking at those beyond visual line of sight and autonomous flights. So first of all, creating an autonomous drone will see even more time savings, which translates into life saved. But also, if we talk about the standardization of performance, there was an experiment called Exercise Northumberland that happened, I think, in 2017 here in the UK, and they looked at lots of different SAR disciplines. They had dog teams, ground teams, helicopters, and drones. And there was multiple ground teams, dog teams, helicopters, and drones. And for example, if we look at just the ground teams, they all had to search the same search area, find the same search targets, and each team, no matter the organization, had very similar performance level, very good success rates, very similar speed as well of searching, because the disciplines there are so mature and so standardized. And that we saw that across the board, apart from with drones. And in fact, with drones, there was 2 teams that were both using the same drone, again, same search area, same search targets. One of them had 100% success rate, but in about 40 minutes. And then the other team had 50% success rate in about 15 minutes. Yeah. So there's, at the moment, no standardization of tactics. As soon as we automate that and make it autonomous, then we can really standardize and optimize that performance as well. So not only are we going to see time savings, but I feel like we're going to see optimized tactics as well as a result of autonomous flights.
Well, that just makes sense because the values become discrete. They're not prone to human error. There's less investment in training, right? Because if you train the model once, well, there's investment, but it's like you said, it's easier to optimize because the results are more repeatable, right? So if somebody retires from the force and they were leading the program, now there's a huge knowledge gap, whereas that never becomes a consideration for something that's software based. Yeah, so interesting take. I also just kind of want to talk about Skydio in the landscape of the United States right now. It seems like they are making really good moves to keep their brand in the headlines, but also I think they've moved away from just getting headlines, period, and more into getting headlines that matter to specific cohorts of people and answering actual needs of the verticals they're addressing. So public safety, if you were to ask me a year and a half ago, I would say that Skydio had a long way to go to win over that audience. Whereas even if you strip out, anti-Chinese drone sentiment in the United States, I think Skydio has done a good job of proving to a good portion of public safety officials in the United States that their device has a certain level of durability that they can rely on, and also those kind of extra whiz-bang wow features that you might not be able to get with other drones on the market. So they're playing their cards really well over the last couple months, and so there's definitely a company that you got to be keeping your eye on in 2021.
Yeah, I'd say that their knowledge of the end user needs for public safety is clear from that press release. They've focused on packages that target like the key capabilities of evidence management, live streaming, 3D scan. These are capabilities that are key and core to using drones for public safety. So you can see that not only are they listening to the end users, but they're working with the right partners as well. Hopefully this is the first collaboration of many, because I know not all public safety agencies use Axon. In the UK, our main supplier for body cams is Reveal. So hopefully it's kind of the start of what's to come.
Oh, I'm sure it's a focus for them. I mean, they want to be the go-to choice for commercial, and in this case, the public safety agencies. Those are the two strongest verticals, or construction, inspection, and public safety are the strongest verticals for commercial grade drone use. And I think they already got, the consumer sector, whatever penetration they were going to make there, they've made it, they'll grow it, but it's not going to be the same as this completely new, kind of vertical integration that they're going for. It's a whole new market, whole new revenue stream for them.
Sure. Yeah. And I just want to remind the viewers, we are coming to you guys live, so please, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. I know Simon from X-Fly Drone in Ottawa, Canada said hello, so hi Simon, and hello Garrick Booker. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you have any questions, please don't be shy. So we're going to talk about the second article of the week. So drone deliveries, medical UAV network gets ready to take flight. So a network of delivery drones transporting blood and vital medical supplies could be launched in the UK as early as 2022, cutting waiting times for life-saving medicines and creating greener, more reliable infrastructure for transporting medical supplies over long distances. I think medical drone deliveries have been in the news over the past year, obviously gaining additional traction, at least here in the States with COVID. We've seen stuff like this happening in Virginia, I think Las Vegas. But this is a little bit different. This is an entire network that could be created, and I'd love to get your kind of insight or thoughts on it, Gemma. Would you have any kind of extra info you could or color you could provide, and what do you think about just some of these strides that the UK is making right now?
Yeah, so this area of the drone industry, as you mentioned, has seen a lot of acceleration through the global pandemic. Yeah. I read a markets report the other day where it pre-COVID, it had estimated this section of the drone industry to be valued at 326 million by 2023. And now, because of the impact of COVID, they actually expect it to reach 4.3 billion pounds by 2030. So, we like our ambitious valuations in the drone world, yeah, but I still think that difference demonstrates the impact that COVID has had. And at the core of that has been public acceptance, right? I think public acceptance or public opinion is very difficult to change otherwise. But during a crisis, opinions change instantly. And so everyone seems to be on board with this concept because the pain point is very much known by the public. And so the media are behind it as well, and that's important. So I'm not surprised that big companies like O2 or Telefonica have joined this area of the drone industry. What I would comment on from this article, so at the bottom of the article, it mentions actually a project that I'm part of, Project Accelerate. And through that project, I've been working with an expert on this part of the drone world, Harry Howe from Apian. And what has become clear to me from my conversations with him is that a lot of people are focusing on blood as the first type of delivery, but actually a stronger business case would be just-in-time pharmaceuticals like chemotherapy. So chemo, some of those drugs, they have a product shelf life or product stability, as they call it, of 20 minutes. So that from being compounded, they've got 20 minutes to get it into the patient before they then have to throw that drug away. And that means that the aseptic labs where they're making these drugs have to be really close to the hospitals. Right. So it's a really short journey. And then they're using specialist vans that have to cool the drug to a certain temperature. Mm-hmm. And then if that van gets stuck in traffic or delayed for other reasons, and they reach the hospital after that 20 minutes, they have to throw that drug away, which some of these drugs cost like £20,000. And not to mention a van to deliver something the size of a test tube. That's very inefficient. And so I feel like drones are perfect for this use case, but also one aseptic lab serves one hospital. So it's a single point A to a single point B. So if we think about the safety case of that, it's a lot simpler than transporting blood, because a blood bank serves multiple hospitals. So it's a great idea, and I think they will probably realize that if they prove this concept with bloods, they'll probably branch out into lots of other use cases. But it's intriguing to see that they are focusing, a lot of these companies are focusing on delivering blood rather than these other use cases that I feel like might have a more short-term viability to them, because the problem of transporting is well known within the industry. So I think it's a greater business need, greater demand, and then we can branch out from there. So positive use case, which is great because it kind of boosts public opinion. It also boosts opinion of the healthcare professionals, which is really important too because they're the end customer. I'd be intrigued to hear their reasoning on why they focused on bloods rather than these just-in-time pharmaceuticals instead.
I've brought that point up myself. I know other people that I'm friends with in the drone industry have addressed it. We had, I think, Tom Walker from Drone Up kind of talk about pharmaceutical distribution that they did in tandem with, was it Walmart, CJ?
Yes, I believe so. Walmart, I think that was in Oklahoma or one of those states.
Yeah, I think if you're a drone company, you got to prove the case with some order of scale, right? So something you can repeatedly test. So that might be a factor for going towards bloods, because the risk of losing it is lower, right? So you can kind of run the test and improve the case prior to that, and then you could say I can do deliveries between, hospital buildings on a campus. And I know I could do it with set regularity. That might be some of the impetus. But like you said, there's kind of like a falling off point where it's like, is it worth the scale and investment here where other use cases can actually prove more valuable to the patients for the investment in trying to get this set up in the first place?
Yeah, or anything perishable, like you were saying, Gemma. If the chemotherapy drugs lose their efficacy after 20 minutes, and they're that expensive, like you were saying too. I mean, there's a legitimate business case too to get it there sooner, and then obviously the health case of getting people the medication that they need. You mentioned public perception too, and I'm always curious to hear people think about just like how these use cases really shape the public perception from people outside of the drone industry. I think the industry and the technology can be polarizing at times. What do you think of like how these use cases impact public perception? Do you think, in these type of articles, they're in the news, is this stuff that will get kind of the public embracing this technology more and more, and we'll see it proliferate?
Yeah, I definitely think so. My experience, I know public acceptance is such a big, well-known barrier for drone technology, but my personal experience of flying drones in search and rescue, the public have questions and perhaps problems with you flying a drone until you explain what you're there for. And I've never then had someone have a problem with the fact that I'm flying. In fact, the response, no matter the age or gender or anything like that, they've always been like, that's a great use of the technology. I had no idea they were being used for that. So I think the acceptance curve of drone technology will probably mimic something similar to CCTV. I can imagine that when that first came out, it was kind of like this dystopian Big Brother type feel. And when they saw CCTV, it was like an invasion of privacy like people are experiencing right now. But then it caught enough criminals, it deterred enough crime that now when people see CCTV, they feel safe. And hopefully the direction that we're going now with the drone industry, with the media finally on board with rebranding drones as life-saving tools for these deliveries and for search and rescue, etc. Hopefully we can rebrand them in such a way that when the public see a drone in the sky, they feel safe. But that's my hope.
Yeah, sure. Well, we have one more article to get to, another one that's a little bit more close to home for Gemma. So drones used to deliver COVID tests and samples to Scotland's rural communities. So drones are being used to deliver tests and collect blood samples from some of these isolated communities. The drones, which are capable of an altitude of up to 5,000 feet and they can fly almost 100 miles an hour, massively reducing the amount of time taken to deliver medical supplies and tests to the, and I might say this wrong, the Hebrides Islands in Scotland. Medical samples that would normally be carried by ferries and it could take up to 2 days to arrive at laboratories now just take up to 30 minutes with drones. And like we mentioned in the last article, the drones are also more environmentally friendly than sending ferries or sending vans or anything that obviously runs on gasoline. So Gemma, I know you sent this article over to us, and another great use case. I'd love to just hear some of your thoughts and insight about this.
Yeah, I think this article is just great because I feel like everyone's a winner from it. Because Skyports have not only identified a problem that their drone delivery service can solve, but they've identified this problem in a low-risk environment, and that's kind of a win-win, isn't it? Because they're flying over the water from mainland Scotland to Scottish Islands, and in airspace that has comparatively low aviation activity. So the risks are low, and yet the rewards are huge, because beforehand it took 2 days, and now their turnaround time is 2 hours. But also they're solving two problems with one solution. The problem of delivering COVID test kits is one problem, and the problem of collecting blood samples in a timely manner is the second problem, and their solution is solving both of these. But also having that second problem adds to the business case for them as well, because hopefully delivering COVID test kits won't be a permanent pressing issue. That's what we're all hoping, right. Touch wood. That won't be a permanent challenge, but collecting blood will be. So I feel it's a great news story because it's low risk, high rewards, and good business viability, which are definitely applications that the CAA or your version of the FAA love to see, because they can prove the technology, prove the safety case when it's low risk, and yet it's still having a huge impact on society. So yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah, it feels good when doing the right thing also makes economic sense, right?
Yeah.
Well, I've often said that West Virginia should, take up drone technology like no other state in the United States, because it's so mountainous there that the clear kind of shortening of distance in just being able to get packages over that area. And then again, like you were talking about here, where there's low risk, this is a perfect use case for drones, right? Yeah, so definitely a feel-good story of the week. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
So, Gemma, I want to let's talk a little bit more about you and SkyBound Rescuer project. You work with a ton of public safety organizations, and I would just love to know, how have those conversations changed over the year? Are you, the questions that they come to you with, are those changing? Are you seeing kind of a level of maybe understanding or a level of competence around the industry, much more today than you were maybe a year ago? And then just in general, what are some of the maybe pain points you hear about from these public safety agencies?
Yeah, I would say the initial conversations have certainly got easier. When I first started doing this, it was kind of an uphill struggle to convince them that drones could offer them something. They were constantly comparing drones to helicopters and what drones couldn't do in comparison. Like, drones can't fly for hours, drones can't fly in these weather conditions, and drones can't extricate a casualty to hospital, rather than focusing on, okay, but what can we do with a drone in the 20 minutes that it allows, and in the weather conditions, what can we do? And also, what can we use a drone for that we can't use a helicopter for because of the drastic difference in cost? But also because a drone is flying lower and slower, we can do things like 3D mapping that helicopters are not very good at. And it was a definite struggle to change that mindset at the beginning, but now it's definitely an accepted piece of technology. Drones are seen as a must-have rather than a nice-to-have, which is great. Yeah. So the initial conversations are certainly a lot easier, but answering the questions have probably got tougher because people have gone from how do we get started to how do we get better? Right. And some of those answers, they need better research, more research in order to answer them properly, and that takes time and it takes money. So it can be a longer period of time before I can conclude on the questions that they ask me, but the conversations are certainly a lot easier. They're a lot more collaborative and open to the idea of drones. So yeah, it's progressing in the right direction.
And when you're fielding these helicopter versus drone questions, yeah, you kind of framed it that they are saying it's one or the other, but there's potentially a place for both, right, in these agencies, and they have different use cases and different reasons why they might use one versus the other in different situations.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about air support, there's three interlinked variables that if you try to control one, the other two will change, and that's availability, response times, and cost. So if we reduce the cost of air support, then we can have more of them, which improves availability, because the chances of one being available to respond are higher. And that also means that there's better response times, because if they're available, they can respond immediately. And so all we're trying to do here is we're not saying it's instead of helicopters, but we are adding to the overall number of air support, which then improves all of those variables for every service available. So when we're talking about this network of drones, drone in a box, that we're calling the emergency drone network, we are looking for that to be blended into the Coast Guard helicopter and to the police helicopter services, so there's just more options for air support, so that no emergency service has to go without air support when it's needed. And it is not one or the other. They are stronger when they're together.
Right.
Yeah, it's adding more resolution to your situational awareness. You know, what are the actual circumstances on the ground? Possibly finding out information ahead of time in the time that it takes to prep a helicopter, deploy a helicopter. All those like extra little, you know, you're basically filling in gaps.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, filling the weaknesses. So the first stage of this project of the network, we researched in quite a lot of detail the current state of air support and the weaknesses of those, to make sure that we are our proposal is strengthening those services as well. And it's really important that we achieve that. Because it shouldn't be one or the other. I think sometimes if I went to an emergency service and said we can task a drone to assess the situation and see if a helicopter is needed, the response there is often, well, we're then wasting time, because if the helicopter is needed, then it should be tasked straight away. But actually, in the reality of it is that in some of those cases, they're assessing the viability of tasking a helicopter with no situational awareness of the incident. And so that incident is actually going without any form of air support. So we're not slowing things down, we're actually making the whole thing more viable.
Right, and you could deploy the helicopter to the wrong place too, because you have no previous situational awareness, so the entire deployment could be a waste.
I think, and you brought up an interesting point too, saying that, you know, the drones are able to actually get some data that helicopters aren't, because they're able to fly maybe lower or fly slower, and use different sensors and cameras. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what are some situations? Because I think a lot of times we think, okay, we can use a drone instead of a helicopter, and we'll be saving money and do it quicker. But it's actually not only that, you can actually get additional information that you wouldn't be able to traditionally get with a helicopter. Do you have any kind of like use cases like that, or add any kind of examples to frame something like that up?
Yeah, a good example of this around search and rescue is cliff-based search and rescue. So first of all, actually searching for the missing person around a cliff top, especially I'm on the south coast of England. We have a lot of sandstones, so a lot of cliff falls. We would not task a helicopter because it'd be too dangerous for those that are searching on the cliff top. But a drone is perfect for that. Also around our our coastline, we have a lot of overhanging cliffs. So if someone has been kayaking or they have fallen down, and they could be hidden quite easily by an overhanging cliff. And it would be impossible for the ground teams to actually find that missing person. But in several cases, a drone has found that person very quickly, saved them from the tides that are usually, that's the bit that's risking their life at the bottom of that cliff. You can't see them, the tide is coming in, and the drone has saved that person. But then with the rescue, it's also providing the overwatch for the cliff rescue, because setting up a rig for a cliff rescue can take a few hours. And so if you set it up in the wrong position because you don't have eyes on the casualty, you're wasting a few hours that you probably don't have to waste. So having that drone in the sky to make sure you're setting up the rig properly, but also then making sure that the person doing the cliff rescue is also safe, because you can have eyes on them at the whole time. Right. It's game changing for that use case, right, which helicopters were not able to do.
Yeah, no, that's great. And just wanted to remind to the listeners that we are coming live. So if you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat, and we'll get those answered. Jim, I was wondering if you could just maybe compare and contrast kind of the drone landscape, and especially public safety in maybe different countries. Whether that's different countries around Europe. I mean, obviously the EU is kind of has some different policies that are being used by a lot of countries in Europe. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about kind of the different geographies, different markets, and kind of maybe how you're seeing drone technology be incorporated.
Yeah, I'd say based on the countries that I've worked with mostly, I'd say that Canada and Australia are really they're leading the way when it comes to beyond visual line of sight, BVLOS. And I think it's probably because of the environment of their country. The population is less dense, especially compared to the UK. They're spread over much bigger spaces. There's lots of open spaces. So again, we're talking about this low risk environment to test the technology. I know that a lot of major players like Google have moved their R&D facilities to places like Queensland and Australia so that they can trial BVLOS every single day, which they weren't able to do in other countries. So I would say that they're probably leading the way in that aspect. From a UK perspective, our government invested £33.5 million into lots of different drone projects under the Future Flight Challenge Fund. I mentioned that our company was one of those, part of a consortium called Project Accelerate. And we're setting up a 8-kilometre airspace corridor, which will be the UK's first commercial airspace corridor for BVLOS drone operations in unsegregated airspace. And we're looking at emergency response, medical deliveries, and infrastructure inspection for that airspace corridor in its initial phases. And we're one of many projects like that. The O2 article that we mentioned before, that's also part of that. So this is going to see a huge boost to the UK drone ecosystem, which is very exciting. Yeah. And then I'll say from a public safety perspective, the US are leading the way in terms of drones as a first responder, which was pioneered by Chula Vista Police Department, as I'm sure you're aware. And they have had some amazing results. And what I particularly like about their approach is that now they're putting a lot of focus on sharing those results and sharing how they managed to achieve it through organizations like DRONERESPONDERS. And that's what I would like to see happening more from all of these projects. There's very little communication within one country, let alone internationally. And forever, when I travel and do a lot of public speaking before COVID, I was hearing a lot of organizations saying that they were the first to do something. And I wasn't entirely convinced that they were the first to do something because someone else had told me they were the first to do it. So I feel like better communication is definitely needed, and it will enable us all to progress quicker, which is obviously more cost effective, and it will benefit the whole drone industry.
We've seen that on the software side also early on, where and there's degrees of splintering no matter what you do, where there was a bunch of open source islands that even weren't talking to each other, and then also like people assuming that their like the only people working on a set of problems. And then that ends up becoming wasted human energy, right? Because we only have so much talent in the drone industry. We're not at that scale yet where you can trip over a drone pilot or a drone developer. So it really does matter. I think everybody needs to be aware that if you're doing it, somebody else is probably doing it. See if there's a way to communicate with other people who have this interest of developing a drone program. Search search Facebook groups, search Slack groups, search wherever you can to try and find ways to connect with the community, because it'll make the difference. You could save time in not only research, but also being able to share what you're doing could possibly save a life.
Yeah, definitely. I think collaboration is key.
Yeah. Gemma, like how has being able to show different public safety agencies either content or use cases or case studies from across the world, is that just like, how can you just put that into maybe words a little bit more about how that's maybe made life easier for you, and it just adds it just, there's no other way to get that information across sometimes than showing people a use case that's already happened or documenting it and looking through a case study. I mean, has that made those conversations easier and helped you kind of convince public safety agencies about what's possible and maybe accelerated the adoption?
Yeah, definitely. I think most emergency services are in their very initial stages when they're looking at drones. They all do a feasibility study, and there was a lot of repeated effort around these feasibility studies. But also from a search and rescue perspective, a lot of STAR organizations are voluntary, and so they're having to apply for funding or do fundraising, and any kind of positive successful stories that they can use really helps with the fundraising, and it helps with the feasibility assessment of the emergency services as well. And one that has been quoted and requoted many times was DJI's efficacy study that proved that drones were finding people faster than ground teams, albeit by 3 minutes in this study. But the fact that it was faster has been used across so many different funding applications, feasibility studies now. And that shows the impact of when you start sharing this information, it really helps everyone to grow. And it's so important. Every research project that I've done, I've made available to publicly. Because it's so important, and that's why I also try to do these podcasts, speak at conferences, because education is key, because it's more important than actually the research itself almost, because it can't have any impact if it just stays a research paper. It only starts having an impact when you start sharing it.
Good point. Well said. We had Scott Malakar on, who is captain at the Willoughby Fire Department, and he was talking about when he was making the case to his higher-ups to get funding for his program, how he did PowerPoint presentations, and they were moving a little slowly, but when he was actually able to show them a video, and I think it was a nighttime flight, and using a thermal camera and finding somebody in the woods, like instantly that he was able to just get buy-in from the higher ups. Have you seen something like that too? Is just being able to show some of the video assets? Does that sell kind of the value? Picture says 1,000 words. Is that something that you've seen as well?
Yeah, I guess seeing is believing, and I have found that online videos have had less of an impact with people that control the purse strings within emergency services, because I think there's always the perception that it's telling an unrealistic story. But what I have found to be better is to actually have a demonstration, or to come along to some SAR training and really demonstrate the capability, allow them to use it, play with the technology, see what it can do. And that, I think, very rarely have I then been faced with people saying that I wouldn't be using a drone technology, a drone for search and rescue. When they can see it, see what they can do. Usually the people that we're doing that with, they don't get to see what the helicopter's seeing, so they've never seen that perspective before, right? So it definitely opens their eyes to the opportunity of drones.
Sure.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that too, where for a while there was a dip in interest on live demonstrations, but then especially as the public safety use cases started to climb, that's really what guests at our conference are looking to see. So we're hoping to achieve that this year.
Gemma, one question we'd like to ask all the guests: what, if anything, what do you think is holding the industry back? And that could be broader drone industry, or if you just want to talk about specific to public safety uses of drone technology. What if anything would you like to see?
Yeah, so one from a public safety perspective is that at the moment the value of the drone is very much dependent on the knowledge of the drone pilot. So I do think we need to kind of take that drone pilot's knowledge and put it into software so that that performance is repeatable, it's reliable. But from a kind of general drone perspective, the usual culprit of regulations, I certainly don't envy the position of a regulator. It's a very tough thing to get right, but it's not just the regulations themselves. I would say it's the resource management of the regulators. I don't believe that their teams are growing at the same rate as the industry's growing, and therefore things are slowing down. So even if we've got great regulations in place that are fit for purpose, if we're trying to do things outside of that, like most people are with BVLOS, it's a very slow process because they don't have capacity. So I do think there needs to be a lot more investment in growing those teams, because the technology is inevitably growing faster, developing faster than the regulations. And so they need to perhaps manage that a bit more efficiently.
Right.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting things we saw with the rulemaking in the United States around remote ID. When people heard, okay, and now 38 months it'll be implemented, it's like 38 months is 10 drone lifetimes. Yeah. What we've seen in terms of technology being and what it's been able to achieve in the last 3 years. And then also a lot of the technology on the drones themselves, like we had it 5 years ago. It's just we're making it better. So that's the other thing is, stuff we already have now that is just going to be refined and get better, where the questions that are being asked kind of diminish. But like you said, the regulators have a tough job on one side, which is some of the bigger technologies that are required for a fully integrated sky actually aren't there yet. And then there's also, the kind of newness of drones. Like, yeah, they understand them now. They are learning the vocabulary at an accelerated rate, but it fundamentally is a different thing than commercial air traffic. But yet it has to integrate with that current system for safety reasons. And that's, I think the disparity in cultures is not going to be displaced until we are a larger economic concern. And we're just not there yet. And I think that's why there was a lot of interest in getting UAM on the board, is so we could say, hey, we're worth this much. Where, that's kind of slowing the gears down.
Sure. Well, Jim, I know we're coming up on an hour. It's almost 6 p.m. out there, so you might be late for happy hour or something. So any final thoughts, final comments you want to say? And then how could people get in touch to learn a little bit more? Either connect with you, ask some follow-up questions, and then learn more about the SkyBound Rescuer project.
Yeah, I mean, we're very active on social media, especially LinkedIn, but also Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So please do find SkyBound Rescuer on those channels. We do have a lot of exciting announcements in the pipeline, especially around our emergency drone network. So yeah, please do find us, follow us, and join us on our life-saving mission.
Great, awesome. And obviously send over any big announcements, and we'll get those circulating as well through the InnoDrone networks. So awesome. Thanks again for joining us today, Gemma. Really great conversation. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We will put this on the InnoDrone Launchpad, launchpad.aero. You can watch this and all previous podcasts on demand, all InnoDrone session content. And this will also be on YouTube and Twitch and wherever pods are casted. So thanks again, everybody, and I will see you guys all next week.
Cool.